You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
It is an absolutely stunning day here in Seattle, Michigan. Can you believe it's May 1st? It does not look, nor does it feel like May 1st. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, getting a little bit of a later start than I would have liked to today. It's like 3 p.m. Not what I had in the cards for the day, but it's you ever have one of those days where you like, whether I'm assuming a lot of you probably are going into an office or whatever. Obviously, I work from home, but you ever have one of those days, if it's like a weekend or something like that, you've been really busy, you have all these ideas of what you're going to do, and then you just like crash the first moment you can. And then maybe that next day, like you intend on doing some other stuff, and instead you just, you go ham with some other things. For me today, because yesterday was a crash day. And then today I was like, all right, let's get to work. And the work ended up being starting to kind of get this house together a little bit. It's just been like nonstop, because it was just like the clutter of boxes was just driving me insane. Anyway, that might be what I've been doing today. What happened over the weekend was we saw 9 Michigan football players get drafted. That is the third most in all of college football. Yes, that's more, 3 more than Ohio State or Penn State, who had some kind of surprising guys not go. The eternal talker, Cam Brown, undrafted. Yeah, that's right. Undrafted. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. Cam Brown, undrafted. PJ Mustipher, surprisingly undrafted. Some of those guys that you would have thought for sure were going. Whereas Michigan, conversely, is putting kickers into the league in day 2. Insane. We're going to go over, I did like a grading thing on Wolverines Wire where I graded it from the player perspective. We'll kind of do a little bit of looking at that as in terms of where each player went, how they did as far as, you know, what their expectations were, all of that. And then we'll do that for the first 2 segments. And then we're going to get into East Lansing, what's going on over there, because it's falling apart over there. Don't listen to anyone that tells you that it's not, right? Like, it's one thing when, you know, you have a quarterback that's beaten out and he decides he's going to leave. It's another thing entirely, like if J.J. McCarthy, let's say Roman Wilson or Cornelius Johnson, either or, and then Will Johnson all decided to leave in an offseason, it would be one of those things where we'd all be looking at it as a disaster. And yet, kind of what I've seen from some of the people out of East Lansing is like officer bar braiding and nothing to see here. Move along, folks. So we'll get to that. It's a very long prelude. So 9 Michigan players drafted. We already covered Mozzie Smith in round 1 going to the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys decided they love Wolverines, and they decided to go with Luke Schoonmaker in the second round, which is absolutely just as much as Mozzie. And for those who didn't listen to Friday's episode, Mozzie Smith to the Dallas Cowboys is about as perfect of a fit. Like, it was the only team I could kind of really see him playing for whatever reason. So that made sense. And kind of in the same vein, it's the same thing for Luke Schoonmaker, who is just like as if Jerry Jones went into a lab and decided to draw up what a tight end would look like for the Dallas Cowboys. Keeping in mind, Dallas Cowboys love taking tight ends in the draft. It's like an every other draft type scenario for them. They already have Luke Schoonmaker. They got Luke Schoonmaker. They already had Sean McCune as an undrafted free agent. They briefly went with Nick Eubanks as an undrafted free agent, which kind of doesn't really fit their style, right? Like, they like the blocky, catchy types, not the I'm just a big wide receiver. Like, I can't imagine Dallas taking Colston Loveland, right? Like, I don't think that's going to happen. That he's more of a probably like a Saints or a 49ers or, you know, someone more like that. You know what I mean? So That is big for Luke, right? Getting a second round, like he wasn't in any mock draft that I saw in the second. I think I saw one or two of him in the third. I would imagine most people were thinking like the fourth. And it was funny seeing some of the Dallas Cowboys fans' reactions. Remember, Cameron Magruder was just like, whoa, hold up. What is this all about? And I was like, you know what? No, you're going to love this guy. Like, you're going to love Mozzie. You're going to love Luke Schoonmaker because he is exactly the type of guy that the Dallas Cowboys would take. Whether they could have gotten him in the third round is immaterial. And I think sometimes that's the case, right? You talk about the Detroit Lions, for instance. A lot of people were really upset about their draft, at least in the first 2 days. The way I looked at it is if you just shuffle the order, if you made it Brian Branch, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, and then Sam Laporta, I think people would have been like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. That works. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily go in the order you think it will, but if you still get the types of players, that you want to get, then that's the important thing. So I think that's an A+ win for both Luke Schoonmaker and the Dallas Cowboys. DJ Turner went a couple picks behind him, a little bit. Was it like 2 picks behind him or something like that? That's how it always goes, by the way. It's kind of funny how that works. It's always like you get one guy published. This is why you do pre-writes. You get one guy published, and then the next guy's going to go sometime in the next 5 minutes. It just always goes that way. But DJ Turner goes to the Cincinnati Bengals and gets to re-team with Daxton Hill in the defensive backfield there. Fastest man in the draft, falls to the 60th pick in the overall in the second round. So tail end of the second round. I think that's a little disappointing because I think that when you're the fastest guy in the draft, you hope you go a little bit earlier. There were probably like 7 cornerbacks taken before him. Still went ahead of some other guys that were, you would think would be, pretty high. Keely Ringo from Georgia going in like the 4th round. So it's a pretty good deal that he did go in the second and not the third. Because it seems like usually Michigan has those types of guys go in the third. So he's still, the fact that they had 3 draft picks in the first 2 rounds is very un-Michigan-like in some ways. Now, no, they had 3 draft picks in the first 2 rounds last year, and certainly could have been 3 first-round picks if David Ojabo doesn't get hurt. But nonetheless, I mean, it is definitely one of those things where I think that DJ Turner could have done a little bit better, but I say it's like a B+ type pick. All right, we've got a lot more. We'll get to round 3 and on here momentarily, but before we do that, make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. I'm sure there are all kinds of teams in the NBA playoffs, right? Like the Chargers, the Jets. That's NFL. I don't watch the NBA, but I'm going to tell you, NBA playoffs, go for it. Is it the Lakers and the Grizzlies? I think that's a thing. Those are probably the only 2 that I can name that are in the playoffs right now. I could not, if you did a gun to head, is the Warriors in it? Probably. And I say that as someone who used to be such a huge NBA fan with the going to work Pistons and the bad boys Pistons and all of that. Anyway. There's no better place to bet no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, if you were listening to an ad-supported version of this, you heard me talk about how I don't watch the NBA. It's kind of funny. Now, I stopped watching the NBA when I moved to Los Angeles in 2008 because me and my roommate, we got the whatever version was a league pass, like their Sunday ticket. But the Pistons always played at 4 p.m. I didn't get home until like 8 p.m. So I kind of fell out of touch with the NBA at that point. at that point, I probably knew every single player, every single coach, all of that, and I fell out of touch with it. And then when I moved back here in 2012, it just wasn't the same. I remember going to a Pistons game in 2013, 2014, something like that, and just being like, this is not. Granted, they were bad at that point, but it did not have the same appeal. But I don't watch a lot of sports outside of college football, to be honest. I watch a little bit of NFL, but it's just a very little bit. And I don't watch anything else because college football, it's like it does it for me, right? Like I used to watch everything. I used to watch every NFL game I could get my hands on. I remember being so excited one week for the Colts, and it was the Packers at the Colts. Brett Favre versus Peyton Manning, and just being like, oh, this is going to be so good. Now it's like, if you told me any matchup, I'd just be like, I don't really care. College football satiates it all for me. That said, I mean, I still enjoyed the draft. Days 1 and 2. Day 3 is awful because you have to be on high alert for 7 hours. Anyhow, got Zuri here, who's very confused as to why this podcast is happening. Let's get to the Jake Moody pick, number 99 overall to the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I told you, if you listened to my draft, like where could they go in the draft spiel? I told you he could go as high as the 3rd round. I remember saying it to some colleagues, and they just laughed at me. They're like, that's you tell really, really funny jokes. You are a very funny person. I told you he could go in the 3rd round. Because when you need a guy who is automatic, and he's going to be on your team for 15 years potentially, you just go get him early, right? Like, I understand you can wait, but it's like, that guy is going to get you points. He could lead your team in points. Like, he could be your all-time leading scorer. Why wouldn't you go get him in the 3rd round? Get him before anyone else has that opportunity. That said, I didn't expect it to happen. Trent ended up writing up the article. I hadn't pre-written Jake because I thought he was going to be the next day. So I was like, I can just write that tomorrow before the draft starts. And I actually was like, hey, I got to run over to my grandma's and do something real quick. She's a mile away. So I'm like, if I'm going to be gone for 10, maybe 15 minutes, if you could cover for me. And I had gotten back in the car to come back home. I was gone 6 minutes, if that. And he's like, Jake Moody just got drafted. I'm like, yeah, figures. AA plus. It's just as good as a situation as you can be. Like, that is where, if you're a kicker, you dream of being, right? So I still think it's really funny that I think, where is he from? NBC. I don't remember where he's from. Chris Trapasso. I remember his name. He said that he questioned the pick and said that Jake Moody does not have a big leg. And this just goes to show, and I know it's an impossible task to cover everybody in college football, but like, just get the basic facts right. Like that one guy, and I don't remember who it was now, who said that Devin Bush does not have good sideline to sideline speed. You remember that in 2019, the 2019 draft? They were like, Devin Bush, the big knock on him is he's not fast. Oh, really? So the one thing that he is good at, you say he isn't. So it's just funny when it goes that way. Michigan fans had to wait a little bit for the next pick. No one in round 4. Round 5, within 4 picks of each other, you had both Mike Morris and Olu going to the Seahawks in the 5th round, in kind of the late 5th round. Here's an interesting thing is you had 9 players drafted by 5 teams. The only outlier was Ryan Hayes, who went to the Miami Dolphins, but otherwise the Cowboys picked 2, the 49ers picked 2, the Seahawks picked 2, and the Bengals picked 2. So clearly, I mean, all of these teams really were honed in on what Michigan guys were doing. So I think this was great for Olu. I did read a piece on ESPN with Chris Lowe saying like he slipped. There were some that didn't even have him going in the draft at all. However, and I do think that he did go a little low in the 5th round. But some people have kind of questioned things like his arm length and size overall, his height. and the fact that he is really just a center all the way. He's not a guy you can flex out to guard like Cesar Ruiz did, right? So nonetheless, I mean, he's a guy who's a mauler. He's a Remington and Outland Trophy Award winner. And I think that that's really great for him. Mike Morris, it's a disappointing scenario, especially because he breaks the streak of starting Michigan defensive ends going in the first 3 rounds of the draft. So that's not a great thing for Michigan or for Mike Morris. Mike Morris, I think probably when he decided he was going in the draft, I think probably thought of himself as a second or maybe third rounder. So to go in the 5th round is kind of a disappointing scenario, right? So it is what it is. He's going to have to put that shoulder chip on and do the best he can when you're a 5th round pick, you're not a guarantee to make a roster, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. He's got that opportunity. I think the speed thing kind of hurt him a bit. So we'll see how that ends up going for him. But Olu, I think it went a little bit better because he was a guy that many weren't necessarily thinking that he might not have been drafted. I think that was probably an omission by forgetting. and then some of them, I remember one of them, the people that said that, like, oh, it's just, scouts they're not really talking about him or whatever. I'm like, okay. But for Mike Morris, it's a little bit more disappointing. So I think when he declared, I think we all probably thought of him as a 2nd or 3rd round guy. And I think that's probably where he thought he was going. 6th round, Brad Robbins goes to the Bengals. I think that's great for him, getting to go pretty close to home. He's from Westerville, which is a suburb of Columbus. So he goes back to Ohio as well. I didn't think it was a shoe-in. I didn't pre-write him because I thought that he might go undrafted because he'd been a little streaky. This last year wasn't his best year. But I think, when you're a punter and you have the ability, the directionality of your kicks the way he does, and that's one of the things Cincinnati had spoken about, is getting a punter that has the type of hang time that he gets is really crucial. But he had his moments where it was kind of shaky compared to some of these other years. Last year, he was kicking at 46 yards per, 45 yards per in 2021, or 2020 rather. And in 2022, he was kicking at about 42 yards. So lost a little bit of the curveball there, but nonetheless, went about where you would think he would go. So I gave him I think like a B or a C, kind of average. Like that's where you expect a punter to go, is probably, if they're going to get drafted in the 6th round. So then Michigan had 2 guys picked in the 7th. Ryan Hayes, literally moments, like probably 30, 40 seconds after I had texted Clayton Safey from On3 saying, I don't think Ryan Hayes is going to get drafted. He got drafted by the Dolphins. Stephen Ross steps it up, says he can't let him go. I think that that's kind of another weird thing, right? Like, because I remember, I couldn't find it, but I remember seeing a mock draft after the 2020, going into the 2021 draft, or after the 2021 draft, I think, where it was like Ryan Hayes, 1st round type guy, didn't end up going that way. I think that was going into the 2021 season. It was like a too early. It was like Aiden and Ryan Hayes were like the two guys. And to be a starting left tackle that you didn't really hear much about him, positive or negative, to be honest, as far as his job performance. It wasn't like we were sitting here coming on and being like, this line is a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, except for that Ryan Hayes, but to be the left tackle on both teams and go in the 7th round near the bottom of the draft is kind of surprising, especially considering it's like if you're a good Michigan offensive lineman, you tend to go pretty high, and the ones that didn't go pretty high, like Michael Onwenu, is just killing it. John Runyon, starter, just killing it. So it certainly has an opportunity. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. The other one would be Ronnie Bell, who went to 6 spots higher than Mr. Irrelevant at number 253 overall to the San Francisco 49ers. That's a huge win for, I think, both parties involved. He didn't quite turn out to be Chris Olave as I had thought he would. Had similar stats up until his ACL tear, save for touchdowns. Remember, he led the team in receptions in 2019, but had 1 touchdown on the year, but had similar receiving yards. Doesn't have the sticky hands the same way that Chris Olave. Chris Olave was making circus catches. Ronnie Bell was just getting open. And I wonder if his ACL tear from 2 years ago, if that played a part. But he had 900 yards, bailed 899 this last year. Still wasn't quite, he was very good. I don't think he was as good as he was going to be in 2021 before the injury, to be honest. But the fact that he got drafted is huge. It's probably good for his demeanor to go late so that it can be kind of more of the, all right, I just got to do it again. Being a 3-star, a guy with like no opportunities, go out and do it again. Prove that I can be a mainstay in the league. So I'm not that mad at it. It's better than him being Mr. Relevant, which I saw a mock draft with him going there. So then you have the 2 undrafted free agents. You have Jamon Green, who had another year of eligibility, decided to go into the draft, goes undrafted, gets picked up by the New York Giants. It's always a fail when you have some time left and you decide that you're going to go, because it is a huge uphill battle. It's not unheard of, but it's like being a walk-on, making a roster and becoming a starter. It's not terribly likely. So that's difficult. On the converse side, you have Joel Honigford, who wasn't a featured player for Michigan by any stretch, right? A rotational tight end that had 1 catch in his career, to go to the Arizona Cardinals. Just to get an opportunity, I think, is a huge win for him. That's an A++. I know I didn't give grades to everybody, but those are my thoughts on everybody. That's I think it was a really good draft for Michigan. Out of the 11 possible guys that could be drafted, 12 if you want to count Carter Selzer, who, I mean, wasn't even a rotational player. Then I mean, you had 9 of them get drafted. I mean, that's a really good hit rate, and it's a really good. It really speaks really well about Michigan's development, because when you look at that, Mozzie was the only guy who was like really top of class, first round guy, and then everyone else wasn't. So, and when you consider Jake Moody, 3rd round, Ronnie Bell, even in going into the 7th round, these were the bottom guys in the 2018 class. Literally the 2 bottom guys. So that's huge. All right, let's talk about Michigan State here in a moment. Okay, so let's finish out talking about everything going on at Michigan State. In case you missed it, I know you didn't. Michigan State had 3 guys enter the NCAA transfer portal yesterday, Sunday, and it was kind of shocking because it was Peyton Thorne, Keon Coleman, and Charles Brantley. Like the 3 guys on that team I can name. It's insane, right? To lose your starting quarterback, you have a wide receiver in Keon Coleman, who is maybe the only guy, Brantley probably too, but the only guy that you could probably say with a pretty strong degree of certainty would start at Michigan. And then to also lose to lose a starting cornerback. I mean, that's not great. It's not good. So it does beg the question, what is going on in East Lansing? I want to know if we'll ever find out why this is, why they're losing their stars, their leaders, the guys that you would expect and expect to do anything for them. And that probably changes. I thought they were maybe a 6-6 team this year, and now that it's the Noah Kim show, I believe it was a Kattenhauser that also entered the transfer portal earlier, if I'm not mistaken. You're becoming really increasingly thin at positions you do not want to be thin at. Michigan fans can tell you all about that, right? So it's a bad situation, because now it's like, who's your running back, who's your quarterback, and maybe they luck up, right? Because on the Mark D'Antonio era, it seemed like, oh man, now that guy's gone, who's going to take over? And it wasn't quite like Ohio State with the quarterback situation, but to go from, and they had some pauses, right? But to go from essentially Connor Cook is the end game there, to go from Kirk Cousins to Andrew Maxwell, who wasn't that good, to Connor Cook. That's kind of an embarrassment of riches, just to go from, the one to essentially the third there. Now it's, what are they going to even cobble together? Who are they going to even throw the ball to? I mean, Trey Mosley would be the other guy. He tweeted out something saying, it's still going to work. I'm like, is it? Okay. But you hate to see it. Almost as much as you hate to see Rich Eisen going on and making the comment about DJ Turner out during the draft about, you just want a guy who knows how to win in Ohio. But it's it's one of those things, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you live by the transfer portal, you die by the transfer portal. This is the importance about setting up a culture, right? And it's why maybe you wait a minute with Mel Tucker. I understand LSU was potentially coming in hot and heavy for Mel Tucker. But if I was Michigan State, I would not have committed $100 million over 10 years because he beat Michigan twice. 1 year was the COVID year. The other year was, okay, congratulations, you did it. That really is a commendable thing that he was able to do it. But he did it on the back of one player, really, Kenneth Walker Jr. Or Kenneth Walker III, rather. So maybe you wait before you just give, like, beyond generational wealth. Because now, if you have your second straight losing season, 3-4, he's a guy who's had, coached he's coached 4 years total, right? He's had one winning season. It was 2021. 5-7 at Colorado. And then you had the 2-4 COVID year. 11-2. Or no, sorry. Yeah, 11-2. That's right. In 2021, and then 5-7 again. There's no indication that Mel Tucker is like a really good football coach. It kind of, I understand he's a tough football coach. He's tough-minded. Remember having this conversation when Kalen Gervin was still on the team. He was at the tough event with some of those guys, and I'm close with Kalen Gervin because he was Cass Tech guy. Michigan was a guy, Michigan wasn't really that into him, but he was really into Michigan. And I asked him the difference between Mark D'Antonio and Mel Tucker, and he said, Mel Tucker's way tougher. He's kind of a hard A, But it's clearly not working, and I don't think anyone that is a fan of Michigan football is going to shed a single tear over it. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll find out what we talk about then. So thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.